I'm melting here, but I'm going to talk about a story because this is a perfect thing to put on a private reader's channel, Canada Dry. This is Vladivostok Station by Paul Yoon, Korean American writer, and I think yes, I believe Korean American writer. Published in Harper's Magazine in 2016, is in his collection The Mountain, a 2017 collection of 6 short stories, including the one I'm going to talk about today, Vladivostok Station. I'm talking about it because Sean and Kim had a collaboration and they talked about it, and I left a lame old comment, and I'm not going to make a video to kind of try and jump in on their conversation, so I'm going to make a video here where I can just make a video and yak away all I want. I'll put a link to the story. Go read the story. If for some reason you stumble upon this and you've come this far, might as well go read the story and then come back to me. And then you came back to me. So I read this. I read this story set in Vladivostok Station, the very kind of eastern part of Russia, between what seemed to be two kind of Korean Russian guys. I read them as being kind of middle-aged, at least at the kind of the now part of the story. There's a lot of indications that Costa, the guy who suddenly appears to Misha, is he's gaunt. He's got wrinkles. He's got thinning hair, which puts him, maybe in his 50s. I don't know why I would know that. And that Misha, he's been at his job at the at kind of repairing seats at a railway line station for like so many years. He's the most senior person there, so I mean he could be even older. I read this as a ghost story because I don't know. I don't think that actually Costa is at Kostya is actually alive. I really get the sense that Misha is seeing a ghost here. And indeed, Misha seems to be maybe somebody who's surrounded in ghosts. The inn that he stays at, that is his father's inn, I'm not actually convinced that his father is actually there, is alive. This is all seen through his viewpoint, and he doesn't seem to really have he doesn't there's a lot of like outside indicators that's like what he sees isn't necessarily what's actually there. Later on in the story, he goes to the military base, and there's a young guy there, and he keeps on asking about Costa, and the young guy just ignores him. And then finally, an older guard who recognizes him because he's older and says, like, that Misha had failed all the exams to, I guess, to become a soldier. They actually kind of physically pull him away and put him on the street like he's an annoyance. And it's like he won't go away because he's looking for Costa. He's looking for Kostya. And it's like you get the sense that he's not all there. He's not all there as a character, but we're seeing it so closely from his point of view that you don't clue in on this. So, and it seems like, but his memories and his interactions with Kostya, whether he's a ghost or not, seem to be kind of like very intimate. There's a point where he talks about kind of just, wrapping his arms around Costa and resting his chin on his head. It's like, it's so very tender. You get the sense that this is like an intimate relationship between these two, which was perhaps like a romantic one even. A further outsidering of these Koreans in Russia. The whole history of this seems to be that there's an island just off of this part of Russia, of the largest island in the Russian Federation, which was contested between the Japanese and the Russians. And the Japanese brought or forced all these Koreans to come and settle there. And with the ensuing wars and stuff like that, some of them got repatriated. Some of them didn't. Then there was the Korean War, so there was even further political impossibility. So these are really kind of there's a good hunk of these people that either they became Soviet citizens or they kind of became Japanese citizens or they got back to Korea. But there's a hunk there that even then they're outsiders in this land. They're truly kind of outsiders, and you really get that sense with Misha that he is this outsider. He's like maybe outside of reality. He's been so damaged. He's been damaged. his grandfathers have been damaged, because indeed they it does seem to like the grandfathers were people who were kind of forced onto a plane and taken to this island, and were forced to work on it as, like, slave labor. But they didn't even know what they were. They didn't even know what was going on. They didn't even know they were on an island. And there's a very striking thing here of, like, taking them to the sea, and some of the people trying to escape, and the soldiers not even bothering with them, just letting them dive into the sea and just swim off, basically committing suicide, because you're swimming into the open ocean, and you're going to die. And indeed, they came back. When the next time they came back, there was corpses on the seashore being picked at by birds, which comes back at the end of this story. And other watery imagery of with Misha, like they lost this ball, and Misha goes out and tries to get the ball in the lake, but he ends up going under the water. And there's this whole thing of he panicked. I went down, and for a moment I felt nothing. It was as though I'd found a different place, something far greater than a lake, and it was wonderful to me. I wanted to stay, but I was pulled up. Kostya dove and pulled me up. So it's like there was a point in there that he's like, oh, I just want to kind of surrender to the water. It's like this was like, it was wonderful. It was something far greater than a lake, and it was wonderful to me. I wanted to stay, which is such a haunting image. And at the very end of the story, when he falls asleep, and it gets treated like really crappily by the conductors. They dip his hand in water at one point, and they, you're on he gets to the station, and they're like, go out and go find a woman, which to me has that pointed thing of, you're somebody who doesn't like women, but this is the dominant dudes talking here, and you should find a woman. That's the proper way to do things. So there's that kind of antagonism against this outsider guy here. But so he goes, and he goes to a bookstore, and then he's down by the water, and he's like, wow. And he uses all his money to call his father, and it's like, does his father actually pick up? Is his father actually still alive? And he looks at it, and the last lines of the story are, Dad, I'm by the sea. And that's all I could think of was him almost drowning in the lake and wanting to stay, and the whole thing with the grandfather's memory, that memory of, like, sort of what's happened to his people, of being trapped on this island, and the only escape being to go into the ocean and be sucked under, to die, to end up being corpses picked at by birds, or that is the chances of escape from this kind of existence, I guess. These people, this, so sort of like how screwed they were by history, that they your chances of escaping your history are as much good as your chances are of diving into the ocean and trying to swim back home from this far distant island in the ocean. So yeah, just a wonderful, wonderful story. It's one of these stories where it's spare, and every single detail counts. There's a line at the start of this story. I was almost said poem. There's a line at the start of this story where he talks about how he and Kostya would ride on a bike. Him sitting sitting and Kostya pedaling under the linden trees. And then throughout the rest of the story, there's a kid or kids who seems to be always kind of riding by and staring at him, like, it's like this is the kid from the past kind of going, wow, this is what I turned into. At least that kind of idea, that permeability of time and place, which is also something that gets mixed up in the story, because you have this thing of the kids at one point saying, like, oh, they hear all their father's stories, their grandfather's stories of being, of the like internment camp basically on this island, and all the mass graves, and they're like digging for the bodies, even though they're kids. They don't realize that they're far away. They're not on the island. They're on the Eurasia proper. And the father who erupts into rage, and that has almost his own flashback within that. is crazy, and then just the whole thing of their parentage as well. Just there's a bit in this story. See, I'm going rambling all over the place. This is a great thing to just to blab out and then upload as my private reading. There's this whole thing of the picture he sees Kostya looking at, and it's a picture uh, of Kostya's father, him, and his mother. Oh, actually, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look it up right now because they were talking. Sean and Kim were talking about it, and I'm not quite sure if they got it right, and I'm not even quite sure if I got it right. Yeah, there was a photo on the desk. It was of my mother, Kostya, and Kostya's father. They were in front of the inn, their hair wild from the wind. My father had taken the photo. I could never remember where I was that day. So yes, it is it is it is Misha's mother, Kostya, and Kostya's father. And it was the father taking the picture. So now they could maybe have the same mother, but they definitely most definitely have separate fathers. Um, so, but was that the reason? Did this Russian woman, because it is a actual Russian woman. You see, there's the next mixing of he's not fully just Korean. He is a mixture of Korean and I'm assuming kind of white Russian, because I think, yeah, white Russian, because her name is like Lydia or something like that. So it's very much, and you get the sense of there's a yet another kind of an outsiderness. I'm not of this culture. I'm not of that culture. I am outside it all. I am floating. I am at sea. So yes, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Sunday day of reading, which I cap off, of course, with me blabbing in front of a camera to talk about it, because these are my private joys. More videos later.